I have Deb here today that I wanted her to come and talk to you about what are the impacts if you or a family member is either moving to Arizona or maybe you currently live here and you're thinking the next steps are you'd like to go to an assisted living, but what does that mean and how does that impact insurance?
Well, there's so many aspects of that trail that could be covered in just a few moments of discussion, but essentially, I think the most important things, especially when you're moving a senior, and I'm a senior so I speak tongue in cheek, is that you make sure the bases are all covered from the insurance standpoint. And what this means, especially if you're moving a senior out of state, that can be crucial. A lot of the Medicare plans aren't transferable, and people are in such a conundrum to get their parents here. They're worried about the packing, they're worried about, their medication. There's a litany of things on the list. Sometimes insurance falls to the bottom, but it's very important that they understand that they look at that Medicare plan that their parent has and see if one, is it transferable? If it's a supplement, then a lot of times it's transferable. But the Part D, the drug coverage, isn't. If they have a Medicare Advantage plan, those are regionalized. And when you move from, say, Michigan to Arizona, that's not transferable. So it's really important that the family wraps their arms around that aspect of it, not only the care portion, but oh my goodness, the worst thing you want to have happen is you get someone down here and they have to have critical care, emergency care immediately, and you find out, oh, how does the policy pay for it? And that's another scramble.
Wow, that can be scary. And I know a lot of people when you're moving, insurance is most likely the last thing on your mind.
It is.
For doing that. So now tell me if people, maybe they're not quite ready to move, maybe they're even in their mid 40s or 50s. What are things that they should be looking at for coverage for their future? Because I know sometimes you talk about the different coverages that people should be planning for. So what are some things that we could be opening the eyes to others to make sure they're even preparing themselves?
And that's an excellent question, and it's one of the topics that I have a passion for. The coverage itself is referred to as long-term care. Quite often it's called extended care as well, but it directly involves the children of the parent that they are transitioning. Any child in their 40s, 50s, even 60s that has gone through that, it's so emotional. But in addition to the emotional roller coaster comes the financial aspect of it, and that can be devastating as well. I cared for my mother for 9 years, and it was a labor of love, but by the same token, it can be, as I said, not only emotionally draining, but financially devastating too. So long-term care is a plan that you can put into place, a policy, if you will, that will help you afford not having to deplete your assets that you've worked so hard to accumulate and live in the style that you've grown accustomed to. There's so many beautiful senior living, assisted living, memory cares, that it's not the nursing home stigma that it used to.
Right.
So by having a policy through long-term care, it allows you the liberty and without being a burden to your family to be able to do just that.
I think that's great. I feel like over the last couple of years, you're hearing more and more about people planning on long-term care, but not really understanding what it is, why they may need it. So I like that you're starting to educate more on those options of people thinking in advance. Because I remember when my grandmother, she had 9 children, 10,
Wow.
but 9, and they all were helping to have her, at their houses until they could no longer care and had to go into assisted living. So it is, and that is a financial burden when you're not planning on them having to go to that.
Well, and you couple that with the fact that, back, I would say 10, 20 years ago, it was very common for the family members to take care of other family members, but it's become so complex now with dementia and Alzheimer's. Those aren't easily boxed conditions that can be put in a family environment to where a family member can take care of grandma or even mom, whatever the case may be, because it's a more detailed type of caring. They wake up in the middle of the night and want to go outside and you're asleep. It's not the generation type of caring that we were used to, or that your parent took care of their grandparent or their parent. It's changed, and technology's changed that, medicine has changed that. That's why we're living longer, but to live in the quality of life that we've been accustomed, going out to eat, going to the movies, or living in a nice home that is well furnished. To be able to do that, long-term care is an avenue that should be pursued, and quite often is, by children who have experienced what your family went through, what I went through caring for my mother.
I think too, it's interesting because, like you said, 20 years ago, everyone, family was. My grandmother did end up with dementia and was up at night and into things, and so it did shift things. But the difference of that one being an emergency to my uncle and my aunt were married for over 60 years, and when he knew he was not going to outlive her, and my aunt had Alzheimer's, he had pre-planned everything. And so the facility she was going to be at they were building a memory care, and it was just fascinating to see that it was so planned out that his children had nothing to even think about, that it was her entire path, and she had an amazing, I feel like she might have stayed there 8 more years. But that pre-planning made all the difference compared to sometimes we see families in that emergency, and they are scrambling of what they're going to do financially to afford that.
Well, and I think now, especially with the longevity, with the technology, with the new medical diagnoses that are out there, such as Alzheimer's and dementia, it's even more important today that people be proactive rather than reactive, because long-term care insurance is not something that you wake up after you've been diagnosed with a severe condition and say, oh, I need to go, take care of this and buy a policy. And that's not the practical way to do it. The premium, the underwriting, just being able to obtain the policy would be very difficult. So you're absolutely correct. The pre-planning, putting it into motion while you can, and knowing that it's going to be taken care of. It's a non-tangible product. You can't touch it. It's not like a new car that you go out and you get in and it's woohoo, I'm driving this, it feels great. This is something though that when you do need it, the appreciation of, oh, I'm so glad I did what I did when I did, will have its rapture moment.
No, I love that. So what are ways that people could reach out to you? Do you do consults? Do you talk about what they're thinking for the future? How does that work if they meet with you?
I am more than happy to do free consultations and meet with families. I meet with not only the parents quite often, but meet with their children. It's hard to say children when they're in their 40s and 50s. I know how that goes. But I also do seminars to where the educational piece, the informative piece, I call it the why, the awareness, and the preparedness. And if you know those things and the rationale behind them, it's so much easier to say, this is something I want to learn more about. Educate me. And it's through the education and the understanding that you realize the importance of having that. People understand having life insurance. They understand that they need homeowners, auto insurance. This is a type of insurance, though, that protects you from being a burden later on. And it's so worthwhile. And it's come such a long way. There are many policies out there that are unlimited now that, you know, that's wonderful. Years ago, they had put kind of handcuffs on them and said, okay, we're going to just put these in a bottle and limit them and kind of, you know, brand them. And now with as many baby boomers that are hitting 65 every day, it's like, okay, we need to be creative here. We need to think of new ways, and the new ways are wonderful, and they can help the families work through it. So, as I said, it's not something